Welcome to the Doing Life Together podcast, brought to you by Arch Impact Studios. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Owen.
I'm Eli.
And I'm Evan.
I'm Dan.
That's right. We got a guest today. We're really excited because in this episode, we're going to talk about leadership. We think this topic is important because we all encounter leadership interactions in our life. Pretty much starts the day you're born, child to parent, and then it just changes and evolves throughout your life. So you'll have coaches, teachers, bosses. Some people might refer to their spouse as a boss. But what we want to get across is a leadership interaction is a form of a relationship, right? And relationships have dynamics, and these dynamics shift due to a variety of factors, including the life experiences of those people involved, their expectations, their needs, and the role that each person plays in that interaction. All right. Another question that was on the survey tied to who people identified was leaders was the other, the always famous other. Who else do you view as a leader? And we'll make all these results available if anyone actually wants to read the full data. But there was one on there that I found exceptionally surprising, more because I didn't find it surprising. I was surprised that I wasn't surprised that it was on there, but then I was disappointed that I saw it was on there. And that was somebody said trendsetter. So that got me thinking, can someone you've never actually met and you have zero actual relationship with, can that person be a leader in your life? Because I think this idea of a trendsetter is new, right? Like it's a really new concept, influencers, trendsetters. So can someone you've never met, and I think boys, I want you guys to hold this will be a very interesting generational perspective. So I want you boys to go last. We're going to start with the student of leadership. Dan, in your mind, is someone you've never met and have no actual relationship, can that person be a leader in your life?
I'm sorry, the thought that's going through my mind right now. Okay, Taylor Swift said, get out and vote, and 34,000 people went out and voted. Not that many people have spent any time with Taylor Swift, but did she lead them? Did she influence them? Absolutely. And I think as we were growing up, we saw people on TV or speak, and they influenced us. So in the sense of, do leaders, is one of the things about a leader is that they cause me to do something differently, then yeah, I think it can be. And now the social network is just full of influencers who have millions of followers, and they're labeled as an influencer. So in a sense, that's leadership. There's probably a equal amount of negatives and positives that go with that kind of adoration of a person I don't even know, who doesn't really even interact with me. But there's positives too. Taylor Swift was right. Go out and vote. What do you think?
All right. I'll go next since I'm the next oldest person here. I guess two thoughts were going through. Initially, when I put this question out there, I was appalled. And then as Dan, as you were talking, I was like, he's absolutely right. From experiences, I guess the reason I reacted so negatively is that there's a lot of people out there that have no business trying to influence the way other people live, right? Like they don't have their own life together. Their motive in trying to influence the other people isn't pure. This is not a knock on Taylor Swift. I'm saying there are influencers out there who operate this way, which is that they're only in it for themselves. They're trying to get notoriety. They don't care what happens to the other person who's taking their advice. And so I guess that's why I reacted so adversely to this idea of a trendsetter. It might have even been that maybe I'm the old man on the call today, because it might even just been the term trendsetter. I was like, no, you can't trendsetters. You can't, they're not leaders. But Dan, I think you hit it on the head. If they can share an opinion and it drives other people to action, then yeah, they're definitely leading. So, all right, Owen, you're the next.
Yep.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you. It's definitely possible for them to lead people that they've never met and have never interacted face to face or had a real conversation with. I think it would be very difficult for them to be the main leader in someone's life, just because I don't see how they can do that without actually knowing the person. But leading them, like Papa Dan said, telling them to go out and vote and getting that many people to go out and vote, that is definitely an example of leading. So, yeah, I mean, I have a very similar view with you two on that.
Yeah, you guys have touched on a lot of good stuff. Obviously, it's becoming easier and easier for people to get information out there and for them to get their information seen by people. So obviously, it's becoming way easier for them to have an influence on people.
I was thinking, like Owen, that they definitely can have a role in leading people, but they're not going to typically have the biggest role in someone. Like, they can influence certain decisions that people make, but they're not going to influence the person's life as much as a leader that they truly have a relationship with.
Like there's a lot of wisdom there. So I think that the next most obvious follow-up question, because I think there's two things that are going on right now. As people are listening to this, depending on where they fall on this line, there's probably some outrage and probably some disagreement, even though I think, as a group, you all have presented some really logical conclusions that are hard to argue with. So to kind of bring the sides together to make a positive out of this, because whether or not we like it, it's clearly happening. It was on the survey. We've all said, yep, we can see this. If you were to give a piece of advice, totally unsolicited, to a person who was looking to trendsetters as part of their leadership council, what piece of advice might you give them on, is this trendsetter someone worth allowing to influence my life?
I would probably relate it back to what you were saying, Dad, about how their motives are probably not that great most of the time. Most people on the internet who are trying to be trendsetters or influencers or whatever you want to call it are out there just to make money. It's as their job. So they're not there. They don't truly care what one person on the other side of the screen takes away from it, or if they go out and do the right thing because of it. And so you just have to keep that in mind when you're seeing things on the internet or on social media, and just know that, sure, it might sound great, but they're not truly always just looking out for your best interests, while somebody who you might actually have a relationship with, meet, and can talk to face probably would be more inclined to look out for you and do what's best for you.
Good. So check the people's motives. Take the time to get to know, why is this person saying the things that they're saying? What's in it for them to try to influence me towards this decision?
Okay. I think it, as we talk about an influencer, particularly social media and the Taylor Swift example, I think my advice to anybody is, if you admire this person and you think what they're doing, or they're popular and maybe I should go along, you have to believe that it fits your moral base. And as I was thinking, as parents, we try as hard as we can to give our kids that moral base, because we got to let go as they get older and older, and they're out there now. And boy, sometimes young kids are being influenced by this. And the moral base test is what I think is so important for anybody who's looking at somebody as a leader, just ask yourself, does it fit my values? Is it right for me before you take any action on that kind of a leader? Is that
That's
fit for
really
you guys?
solid. If you can't see the head nods on the podcast, I encourage you to check us out on YouTube, Arch Impact Studio. We also do all of this on YouTube. And actually, you get to see some pretty amazing interactions. This is called Doing Life Together podcast. And we're literally doing life. So sometimes you see some crazy things as we try to record these episodes. So that's Arch Impact Studios on YouTube. Shameless plug. So what about this? Something that kind of caught me off guard. Talking about people who influence your life who you've never actually met. We've talked before. Our religious beliefs play an important part in our role, but the advice we give is mostly agnostic. But Jesus, I've never met him, but he's influenced a lot of what I do. Only one person said anything about a religious leader. So what do you think about that? So as our society is continuing to shift, what's important to them and who they view as influential, what do you think about the fact that only one person said anything about a religious person, a religious figure being a leader? Let's see if we can get Eli to lead this one off. He's always got good ideas. He's just slow to talk.
So there's a lot of distraction in our world today. So it's very possible that a lot of religious people are more just going through the motions and not necessarily really taking religious things, really taking that to heart and being influenced by it. It's very possible that people just hear that they're supposed to go to church, so they go to church when really they're more focused on their phone or whatever, not really, not necessarily actually taking the religious things to heart and actually using those people as major influences.
That's a fair perspective.
I also think that for a lot of people that are younger, as I was saying earlier, their main influence is their parents. And this is also typically the case for their religious beliefs. So I think many younger people don't necessarily have a super strong relationship with a church leader and instead turn to their parents for religious ideas, or if they have any questions, they ask them about that. Like I know when I was growing up, if I had any questions about the Bible or about Jesus or anything, I would ask either my dad or my mom and not really turn to somebody working at my church. So I think for our younger group, that could be the case. I do think when you're older, like I know my dad has some relationships with people inside of our church.
Yeah. I just found it fascinating, right? Like I presume I should have looked at the data, but I presume that generations ago, that answer would have looked different. And so I just think that that's very interesting. Nobody identified a church leader or pastor as a leader in their life. I find it rather telling. All right, let's see. Let's talk about some of the behaviors. So the survey, negative behaviors. So when people said, these are the things that I do not like in leaders, they said superiority, people who think they're better than everybody else. Micromanagers, people who micromanage things. Poor communicators. Hypocrites. And my personal favorite, narcissists. So those are the categories of people who came up as behaviors that we don't like. Looking over. Oh, one more. Leaders who don't take the time to develop the team. So just curious, any of those, you feel like anything isn't inclusive in that list or anything you'd add to that list? Once again, being superiority, micromanaging, poor communicators, hypocrisy, narcissists, and leaders who don't develop their team.
There's one that isn't in there that I hadn't thought of a lot of until I ran into it a few years back. And there are a lot of nice people who are in leadership roles, but they don't have courage. And in a lot of organizations, there are layers. And what people want their leader to do is stand up for them. And when the leader says, hey, I can't do anything about it, that's what they say we have to do, that's what we have to do, that turns off a workforce very quickly. They don't necessarily want you to go crashing into windmills and destroying yourself, but they want you to stand up as a person who is strong when they need you to. And one of the worst things I've had is nice people who are good until they have to be strong. That's kind of what jumps out to me as one of the more negative things. If you report to somebody like that, who won't stand up when they need to.
Dan, I love that. That came in just below the line, but was the idea of avoiding conflict, right?
Yeah.
That's viewed as a negative behavior. A leader who avoids conflict. And that's probably a sign. Typically, that's a sign of lack of courage, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do the thing necessary to have the conflict necessary to get a different outcome. I like that, lacking courage. Good. How does that resonate with the young people? Would you prefer a courageous leader over someone who's kind of not courageous?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Then there was also a list of positive behaviors, and those include people who are wise and smart, people who are helpful, people who are, when they said helpful, they said they either help get the work done or they'll help grow you as an individual. Good characteristics are the ability to connect with your people as an individual. They're good at listening, and they are appreciative or show gratitude. What about that? Are there any positive characteristics that you guys would think to add to that list?
There's a lot of positive things out there that probably aren't on that list. And I'll go back to something I said earlier, and that is great leaders are great listeners. They know how to. I mean, you can't have people feel good about where they're at if you don't take the time to find out how they're doing, what's going on with them, show some interest in them, and when they seem to be disagreeing, not shut them down, listen, and find out where they're coming from and why they're coming from that. So I think that, one of the more positive characteristics that weren't exactly identified there is listener. A good listener is crucial in leadership today. Probably was always crucial, but because of the expectations and we started this out about generations. The first generation before 1946, they whoever their boss is my boss, and I just got to do what I got to do because I have to earn money. But it's changed over the years. And if I don't have a good boss, I'm going to leave. If I don't have somebody who I feel really good about, I'm going to leave. And good about means they're helping us be winners, as well as they're just nice to be around. So, I think that listener is a big one.
Guys, anything else you'd add to that good list?
Was accountable on the list?
No. Why would anyone want a leader who's accountable?
Well, a leader needs to be willing to take accountability when they mess up, as well as just when the group messes up as a whole, not blame those that they're leading for the mistake, and take accountability and say it was also their fault, as well as they need to hold others accountable for their own actions. So if you are a leader and you tell somebody and you have somebody working on a project and they're not getting it done or whatever it is, they're willing to hold them accountable and get them to get that done.
Yep. I think that's really good.
That's
Accountability
one
is a
of
good
one of the strongest, besides listener, being accountable. I really like that.
All right. Evan, what's something you look for in a leader?
I think that one thing that is good for a leader is that they're like, you can count on them to like pass on the information you give them, because like at work, my boss, he's not good at that. So there would be times that I tell him things like certain days I can't work or just stuff like that, and it doesn't get passed on. So I end up getting scheduled for the days I specifically say I can't work. And that's just really inconvenient for the whole crew, because then I'm not able to come in those days. So either someone has to give up their off day to cover my shift, or the people working that day are down a worker. So if they're just not good at passing on information, that is really bad for the whole team.
That's really solid. So that's a different definition necessarily of effective communicating and sort of planning and whatnot. I appreciate that perspective. All right. Anything else we'd add to the list of positive behaviors? These are the opinions of the upcoming generation into the workforce, right? So even the survey results. So what's unfortunate is that as current leaders or whatnot, we are being incredibly ignorant to ignore it, right? And say, well, these are just people's opinions. They're just, people need to adjust to me. People need to embrace my way. It's one of the highest forms of ignorance I see in the workplace, is just this belief that no, everyone else is wrong. Despite all of the evidence, everyone else is wrong, and I just need you to do things my way. And I think that is so important as a current leader in the world and through many facets. It's the greatest thing that I've ever embraced as a leader is becoming uncomfortable in learning how to be flexible to the needs of other people. And it's really, really, really hard. But it's just what you got to do. And if it's only going to get more difficult as people become more confident, right? The younger generation tends to be more confident, right or wrong, not judging, just stating. And confident people, they tend to hold their views strongly. They're less flexible, and not in a bad way, right? They just know what works and what will make them successful. And so they try to advocate for themselves. So speaking to current leaders, you got to get over yourselves. And I just think that is a great leadership characteristic, is that ability to be uncomfortable for the benefit of other people, which, Dan, you called it courage, right? It's basically it's another form of courage. And it's just really missing these days from the workforce. All right. As we think about, one of the questions on there was advice. What advice would you give to help leaders lead you better? And there was one particular quote that came out of the 15 to 18 age group. And it was this: leaders need to get to know their people at a more personal level so they can help them achieve the goals set for them and actually know how to help them, instead of giving everyone the same advice that will not work for every person. So that really resonated with me, because it gets into that importance of getting to know your people on the individual level, getting to know what drives each person, getting to know how to help them succeed. And so I just wanted to call that out, because I just thought that was really well said, right? And it's a mature point of view. And it just gets back to, look, young people have really great ideas. People entering the workforce have amazing ideas, and we need to be respectful of that. And, that's my encouragement to current leaders, is to do that. All right. What about this? So this is something, Dan, I want you to go first on this one, because this is a change I've lived through in the leadership arena. But a lot of people on the survey talked about wanting a leader who was willing to ask for help when they needed it, or admit when they didn't know something. So I presume that is something that wasn't very popular when you started becoming a student of leadership.
Yeah, it wasn't one of the things that was stressed as an example of good leadership is admitting that I need some help and I'm not sure what to do. I'm a little bit lost here. Can somebody help me? It's something that I think a lot of people who are in a leadership position think is a weakness and don't do. Obviously, with the complexity that today brings, because of a number of variables, there's no way you're going to do everything right as a person in charge. And there's no way you're going to have the ability to do this difficult thing without checking with your team and find out what's the best way to do it. So probably there was a time when you acted like you had everything under control was good. But today, you're one of the team members. And you do need to be able to say, I need some help here. Can somebody help us figure it out together? Is really important.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've seen a positive trend towards, is leaders who, I always caveat, if you're going to be a leader, you have to show some level of competence in something before you go around saying, I don't know stuff. So we're not saying good leaders just go around saying, I don't know anything. I don't know. That's not. But that vulnerability to, as Dan, you were pointing out, say these specific things I don't know, is become really, really reassuring as a sign of good leadership, because it gives people time to flourish and an opportunity to demonstrate their own abilities. But I think that is another one that's hugely important. Guys, how would you feel about being in a situation where a leader is like, I don't know that. I need help?
I would probably admire them, because it's definitely very hard to ask for help from people, especially when they're expecting you to lead. And I mean, obviously asking for help doesn't make you a weaker leader as long as you show expertise in certain areas. But yeah, I mean, it also shows that you're looking out for the group and not just hiding that you don't know stuff to make yourself look stronger.
Great perspective. Anybody else? All right. Okay, a couple more questions. Dan, you shared a quote as we were preparing for this from something called the Leadership in the 21st Century, a guy named Joseph Roast.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for you to share that with everybody.
Yeah, as I evolved in my studies of leadership and in doing it in a number of environments where I developed training programs, I developed learning experiences, I did a lot of coaching. There was starting to be more and more the importance of leaders developing around them, not a work unit, but a team. And so, in fact, in the 90s, 1990s, I developed training programs that are all about leadership. and I called it Leadership for the 90s. Well, the turn of the century came along, and I go, wait a minute. Things aren't the same now that they were even back at 1990. I better do a little more research and study to find out where should I be going in the 21st century. And luckily, there was a book out there called Leadership in the 21st Century. And I do want to quote from Joseph Roast's book. And here's the definition. And I'd like to get a little discussion around this. Leadership is an influence relationship between leaders and followers. Remember earlier we were talking about leaders have to be able to influence? Well, in today's world, it is an influence relationship where followers should be able to influence the leader because they see things better. In fact, it was not that many years ago, I was developing workforce development and teamwork for Chrysler because they were in trouble. And the way they got out of trouble was asking the workers, how can we do things better? So influence relationship among leaders and followers who intend real changes. Leadership is about change. Environment is changing. The world is changing. You have to be ahead of the competition if you're going to win. And you do that by looking for changes, looking for improvements. So it's leaders and followers who intend real changes and outcomes that reflect their mutual purposes. You're not going to, in today's world, people who are really good performers and are talented aren't going to stay in an environment where they don't feel a kinship to what that leader is trying to accomplish. So when you work someplace where you're proud to be there, and it could be a restaurant, it could be the Dairy Queen, it could be In-N-Out Burger, but you just love what they do and the way they serve people, and it makes you more inspired to go. So again, leadership is an influence relationship among leaders and followers who intend real change and outcomes to reflect their mutual purposes. I've found that to really capture the 50 years of learning that I've had as a leader, consultant, and trainer. So what do you think? How does that resonate with you?
Can you say the definition one more time?
Yeah, it's leadership is an influence relationship among leaders and followers who intend real changes and outcomes that reflect their mutual purposes.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's a good definition, because if you have leaders and a group of people being led by that person that aren't necessarily feeling that they want the same goals, that's not really going to work out well. So if you have leaders that are leading people together to get a combined goal, that's more likely to work out compared to if everyone's trying to achieve their own thing. That's not really going to work out.
Yeah, definitely when the leaders and the people being led are working together, definitely seems like it'll result in something better than when the leaders just, forcing their own way on people and it's not like a mutual relationship kind of.
Yeah. I mean, if you go someplace and all you're doing is working for the money, and everybody deserves to get paid for what they're doing. But if it's all that's the only reason you're there, you're not going to be giving it your best. You're giving it the best because you believe in what you're working on, and you believe in the person who's just as motivated and even maybe more motivated than you. I want to share one thing and see if that fits with what we're trying to accomplish here. But a couple evenings ago, I watched a basketball game among juniors and seniors. And I thought I saw leadership there that pretty well fit this definition. It was a team that didn't really start out winning a lot of things, but all of a sudden they got stronger and stronger and stronger. And their leader was also a senior, I believe, in high school. And I could tell by the way he would grab the group together that he was listening for as much as what do we need to do now as he was giving. And then I saw, and in most teams, this happens. There's a team that might be a leader called the coach, maybe, but there's also somebody on the floor. And I saw a person on the floor who, when he got out there, he was pointing directions and people were following and people were looking to see what he was doing. He stood to be often standing strong right below the bucket. And I saw two types of leadership on that team that won their championship because of this definition, because they were, it was an influence relationship throughout the team, and they were intending real changes, and they'd had to make changes in order to get to where they were, and it was for their mutual purposes. And man, did they celebrate. So I don't know, Eli, if you think there was a fit there or not, but I certainly felt I saw that kind of fit from where I was sitting.
So I think it definitely helps when there's multiple levels of the leadership, like you're saying, a coach and then a player that kind of helps direct too, because, you know, obviously in that situation, the player has had similar experiences with the other players, can relate to them more and kind of help them out even more on like a personal level and have, you know, similar experiences, while the coach might not necessarily have the same experiences to direct them. So it can definitely help to have kind of someone to bridge the gap a little bit. So like a leader from within, you know, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think that's awesome. All right. I think we've covered everything on the list. So once again, this episode was all about multi-generational leadership. And we pondered the question, you know, what are, this episode was all about multi-generational leadership. And we pondered the question, how can we help leaders and the people who follow them be more effective? We established that, yeah, we believe that life experience matters and that the upcoming generation who will comprise, I believe it's 3/4 of the workforce by the year 2035. So in the next 10 years, 3/4 of the workforce will be millennial and Gen Z. So it's a big portion of the workforce. But how can we drive commonality? How can we help leaders today prepare for their future workforce? Here's how I would summarize the episode. Leaders, great leaders who are capable of reaching across generations and reaching everybody. You should be able to tell what is their motivation or intent. So good leaders have a motivation or intent that supports not only the business themselves, but also the people they lead. Ask yourself, can I learn from this person? Will this person help me personally get better? Will this person care? Do they care about me as a human being, right? So you're looking for a leader who cares about you as a person. Does that leader have healthy relationship skills? So we talked about active listening. They ask good questions. They have courage. They treat you well. These are all things you're looking for in your leaders. Leaders, you need to be able to help your team deliver the best outcomes, right? Am I being led by someone who can help us win? Can they influence? So as a leader, can you help influence to get the best outcomes for yourself, your team, in a position, as they say in some of the best books, there's only one person in a company who doesn't have to answer to anybody, and that's the CEO, and he or she has to answer to the board of directors. So there really is nobody in a company that doesn't answer to anybody. So every level of leadership has to be able to influence. So leaders, can you influence so your team gets the best? And then we talked a lot about evolution. So Dan talked about since 1971, he's been in a leadership position and studying, a student of leadership. Sorry, Dan, a student of leadership since 1971. And so as a leader, you need to be able to evolve and always be growing. So does anyone want to add anything to that list as sort of the summary for the episode? I always love when a good plan comes together. Preparation in advance leads to great outcomes in the end. We should put that on the list. All right. Thanks for listening. In our next episode, we will be talking about a plan for living your best life. So we're going to talk about a method that I've used and that I teach other people to use so that you can live a life of significance instead of just success. And we'll talk about what does it look like to live your best life. So how do you think to you building a community of people that can support you and you can support them, and then finally the habits that you can build to sustain that. So until that next episode, don't forget to check us out, archimpacts.com. That's where every episode is and lots of other helpful content. If you prefer video, our YouTube channel, Arch Impact Studio, check us out there. If you found value in what you heard, don't forget to like and subscribe or scribe to the button. And until next time, get out there and live your best.
Thank you.